Hello, everyone, and welcome to the day. My name is Lori Allen Requa, and I am part of the Peralta team here. And I'm very excited to have you at this next session. If you are interested in using the Zoom captions, if you look down on the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see the closed captioning. You can click that. And it'll give you some options on how you want to see it rolling in. If you have any questions for our presenter in this next session, please do feel free to put them in the chat. Cynthia, I'll help monitor the chat for you. I will also keep us on time. I am very excited to introduce Cynthia Ainsworth. She is from Hartnell College, and Cynthia is going to talk to us about Cultural Humility Toolkit, a transformation journey. So Cynthia, we would love to have you tell us all about that.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share with everybody. This is a project I've been working on for, this is my second year working on it, and it's very near and dear to my heart. And so the fact that I get to share it with you all is very special to me. So I'll go ahead and share my presentation. And let me go ahead and hit the slideshow and make sure you can all see that. Yes, great. So welcome. My name is Cynthia Ainsworth. I'm the Student Services Librarian at Hartnell College, and it is my pleasure to share with you this course I created about the Cultural Humility Toolkit. So the toolkit, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, was first presented at the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges plenary of spring of 2022. And in my personal life and social justice work that I've been doing for over a decade, I've done a deep dive on culture, cultural relevance, and cultural humility. So when I saw that this was being offered at the plenary, I was super excited. This toolkit has 7 different criteria, and within the criteria, there are 2 different sides to this. So this particular one is awareness of bias is this particular criteria. And on one side, there's the self-awareness and then a little rubric to see, how do I rate on being self-aware or awareness of my biases? And then the other is the institutional awareness. So looking at our organization, how are we doing as an organization and understanding our awareness of biases? And then in the middle part, it's like, if you're thinking like you need some little bit more information or you might need to kind of learn more about this, there are some resources in the center that direct the person to go to. So this was the toolkit. It's still available online, and though it is in the phases of being kind of revised, I know ASCCC is working on that, but I've used the toolkit as it is right now. So in 2023-24, our school applied for the Culturally Relevant Pedagogy and Practices Grant from the Chancellor's Office. And one of the projects that was created is to take the toolkit and customize it to guide faculty to reflect and work through the elements of the toolkit. And while this was my charge to do this, and I was grateful enough to be given this project to do. It's really for administrators, it's for staff, it's for really anybody. So it is, while directed at faculty, anybody can benefit from it. So my first year was spent on developing the plan, which was something I was really grateful for, because more often than not, we're given, 2 months and then you got to have something ready to go. And here I had an entire year to develop a plan. So I was very pleased about that. And then this last year, I've been implementing, so working with faculty here on my campus, and then going out and sharing it with other people, because I want everybody to participate in this course. So first, let's stop for a minute and talk about what is cultural humility. So it was first used in a paper in 1998 by two doctors, Dr. Melanie Turvalon and Dr. Jan Marie Garcia, and they were looking at health practitioners and looking at this idea of cultural competence. And, we think, oh, I'm going to learn everything that there is to know about a particular culture, and therefore I know who you are because I know about your culture. And these two doctors are saying, well, cultural humility is a little bit different. You may understand something about my culture, but you don't know me because I have my own lived experiences and I have my own culture that has shaped me. And so it's really looking at, our own experiences that we bring to our understanding. So there were four different principles that are part of cultural humility. The first one is a lifelong commitment to lifelong learning, self reflection, and compassionate self critique. So, really, the first step in cultural humility is looking within in our own heart and how we are showing up in the world, and areas that maybe we could do better, and areas that we can celebrate. Principle number two is an investment in interconnectedness and interdependence. So it's this understanding that we're all connected together. We aren't in our own silos doing our own thing, but we're part of humanity. And what happens to you affects me. What happens to me affects you. So this interconnectedness and interdependence on one another. Principle number three is identifying and redressing power imbalances in relational dynamics, and it's disrupting the systems of oppression and harm. So this is looking at that institution side. We're doing the self-reflection, but what are we doing in our institutions, looking at the power imbalances, being aware of them and disrupting them. And then number four is advocating for and maintaining institutional consistency and accountability with principles 1 through 3. This is not a one and done thing. Cultural humility is not something that you achieve and say, great, I've done it. Now have cultural humility. It is a lifelong process that's constantly changing. And so being committed to that. So I created a course. I thought of all the different ways that it would be useful for faculty to engage with this toolkit, and it seemed most logical for me to create a course that is on a Canvas course, and it is now in Canvas Commons. And so you are welcome to take it and share the course widely and freely. It's designed to be taken in a group and for the group to navigate through the toolkit in a meaningful way. The journey is going to be personal as well as transformative, and you'll have an opportunity to engage with like-minded equity practitioners. And it was really important to me to make the course standalone, so it doesn't require a facilitator. The group is the unit that's taking the course, because I was afraid that if it required somebody to teach the course or facilitate the course, then you were always looking for somebody to keep it going and it wouldn't be sustainable. So the course is a standalone course, and as long as you have a group, you can take the course. I focused on that self-reflection part of the toolkit rather than the institutional part. The reason why I did that is, we talk about our systemic barriers that are in our institutions, things that we need to do to have equitable services for our students. And when we sit around the tables in our committees, in councils, at Academic Senate, we're all in a group together. But if each of us haven't done that personal work when we're sitting at the table, we're not going to be able to break down those barriers. So the purpose of this is to build self-awareness around anti-racist practices for each person in the group so that these practices can develop and unfold in the work we do for the institution. So both are important, but this course is really focusing on that self-reflection piece. And I don't know about your campus, but on mine, we have so many initiatives and projects and things that we're working on to embed equity in our practices, in the things that we do at the institutional level, that I really wanted to focus on the self-reflection piece. So let me tell you some kind of the ins and outs of the course. Each person self-enrolls. It's 8 weeks long, or 8 modules, depending on how you want to take the course. It includes readings, videos, and opportunities for discussion and reflection. The groups are welcome to meet in person or online. It's designed for either modality. Each group member self-enrolls in the course. The course can start at any time the group is ready. So if the group says, let's do it during winter break or during summer break or start in the middle of the semester, or, the group gets to decide when the course is going to start. And the group meets the group meets each week and is facilitated by 3 volunteers for the group using the circle way. And how do you form your group? You can form your group with anybody you want to. You can make it a small group. You can make it a larger group. It could be maybe a group of faculty from one particular area. It could be your bestie from, over in another area. It could be your steering committee from Academic Senate, the whole Academic Senate. It could be anybody. You get to decide how you want your group to be formed. I had one group here on campus who said, I want to take the course with people I don't know. So I was able to pull together a handful of folks and who had never worked together from different disciplines, and they all came together. So that was pretty cool. So let me talk a little bit about the Circle Way. When I first heard about the toolkit in plenary, the 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 person who was running the session was saying, if you're looking at some of these criteria and maybe you have some questions about it and you need to, talk some more, just have a courageous conversation. Well, I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, courageous conversations don't just happen. They, usually if you have people that are talking about deep personal things, there can be a lot of conflict, and those conversations can be difficult to have. So I wanted to have some sort of way that folks coming together in these spaces could take the course and have these conversations that are going to be meaningful and constructive. The Circle Way is a book that's open source. You can find it online. I've taken courses before using the Circle Way, both in a small group and a large group, and really it's a wonderful tool. From the book, it says to gather people to talk about something important, you don't simply throw them together and hope that some kind of meaningful outcome occurs. Instead, a container is created that suits the conversation, and the Circle Way is such a container. The circle can help people hold complexity, work through conflict, discover new possibilities for collaboration, and honor diversity. And there are 3 different jobs in each meeting using the Circle Way. One is the host, one is the guardian, and one is the scribe or timekeeper. And that job rotates among the group members, and it gives the group a sense of autonomy, that they're working as the group and also supporting one another. And it's really a lovely way to have your meetings. And the first module, I call it the pre-module or the 0 module, talks about the Circle Way and how to use it before you start your meetings. So what are the different modules? Before you start, how to use the Circle Way. And then these are the different modules. What is cultural humility? Talks a little bit about, this idea of explaining the ideas. Module 2 is the awareness of bias. That's from the toolkit. Then acknowledgement of diverse perspectives of thinking, understanding race consciousness, commitment to disrupt microaggressions, IDEAA, commitment to anti-racist practices, commitment to relate to diverse lived experiences. And then the last module is reflections, commitments, and coming up with a plan of action for each individual. Each element or each module, except for the very first one, is structured the same way, with starting with the circle way that has check-in and agreements, looking at the toolkit and the criteria, looking at the overview of what this concept is about. And then there's the content. We'll come back to why I have a picture of Lasana Hotep there. Um, after looking at the reflection, lots of opportunities for discussion and sharing. Then there's a checkout and a farewell. And then there's some midweek assignments, something to do, read, watch, listen, or reflect for personal growth. And then midweek journaling, a chance to reflect. So, like I said, that in the toolkit, on the one side was the self-reflection, and on the other side was the institutional reflection. And then in the middle was resources that you could look at to help you further your understanding. Well, majority of these resources came from the Vision Resource Center through the Chancellor's office. And there were two workshops that you could take that were offered by Lasana Hotep. And for those of you who know Lasana, because my very first Equity Institute I attended in 2018, I think it was, and Lasana Hotep from Skyline was there, and he was one of the leaders of the whole institute. Now he's over, I think, at UC Berkeley. At any rate, he's done two amazing workshops that are in the Vision Resource Center on these different topics of these criteria. And there's absolutely no way to get it out of the VRC. You can't embed it into Canvas. It's locked in there tight as can be. But it was really important to me to adhere to the toolkit and the resources that were recommended. It was also really important to me as a white person to make sure that I am lifting up the voice of and honoring the work that's been done by people of color. So I asked Lasana, could I go ahead and use the content that you have in these workshops? And he gave his permission to do so with attribution, which I've done in the course. And so that's why I put the picture here, because his work is amazing. I mean, if you look at the whole criteria of disrupting microaggressions, it just seemed just inappropriate for a white person to be talking about microaggressions. It needed to come from a person of color to explain that, what that might feel like. So I was grateful to honor his work, and a lot of his work is in this course. Which then takes me to one thing that I want to mention right now is that I do have a Creative Commons license on the course. It is in the Canvas Commons. You can share it widely and freely with anybody that you want. But I have put the license on it, the Creative Commons license, that it can't be changed in any way. So normally if it was my own work, I would say, oh, change, do whatever you want. I don't care. But because I'm building on the work of Lasana, it felt like I couldn't give permission to change something of portions that weren't mine to change. So when you do look at that, I ask you not to change anything in the course, but to share it amongst everybody that you know. So we're going to take a look. I'm looking at my time here, not too bad. 2 pages I pulled out of some of the modules. It was kind of difficult to do so because each of the pages aren't really a standalone page. There's a lot of scaffolding within the module, building upon the different ideas as you work through the module. And there's also lots of opportunities for conversation, and that's built upon. I also wanted to recognize that normally before any session starts, and I'm sure you do this as well, you have some agreements that you talk about how we're going to relate to one another and how we're going to speak to one another in an environment where there might be some big feelings about things. So I was able to pull out 2 pages from from 2 different modules that kind of felt like areas that we could maybe have a discussion. And so the first one is an awareness of bias. Now, my guess is that because y'all are here at an Equity Institute, at an equity conference, you're probably aware of what bias is and how it can show up in our lives. But I thought, there's always biases to look at. I'm always amazed when something happens and I'll go like, oh my gosh, that's one of my biases that's popping up and coming to the surface. So we're going to talk a minute, and I'm hoping now in this moment as I'm sitting here, I'm hoping you'll be able to hear this little video that I embedded into this presentation. So we'll see in real time whether I did a good job at that or not. So biases, unconscious bias, which we also know as implicit bias, is prejudice in favor of or against a thing, person, or group as compared to another in a way that is usually considered unfair. And research suggests that unconscious bias occurs automatically as the brain makes quick judgments based on past experiences. So when we talked about cultural humility and those lived experiences that we have, those lived experiences fuel our biases depending on what those experiences are. We can't process all the information we're constantly taking in, so our mind relies on shortcuts. These shortcuts rely on associations. When you think of one, you think of the other, and a connection is made. So here's a little video on peanut butter, jelly, and racism. So I'll go ahead and start it. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. If not, stop me and we'll see if we can't figure something out.
Implicit bias. 2016 was the year that implicit bias.
We can hear it, but maybe you can turn the volume up a little bit.
Sure can. That's as long, maybe.
What about using like the I know sometimes when I share something and it's very quiet, when I click on the share, if I click share computer sound, it makes it louder.
All right, and where would I find that share computer sound?
I usually press Alt Shift S to get me to the share screen.
Okay.
And then there's a little, then you can choose what screen you're going to share. And then there's a little place where you click a button that says share computer sound, like a little, put a check mark where share computer sound is.
All right, let me.
I think you might have to unshare it first and then do that. Oh, I see.
Okay.
Oh.
Did that make it any louder? Me
It's
talking?
not playing. It's not
Yeah.
playing yet. Let me see here.
Cynthia, if you want.
Is that better?
Still quiet. Actually, the video is quiet. You're not. Your voice is fine, but
Okay.
Cynthia,
Let me stop.
put the link? Why don't you put the link in the chat so that one of us can play for you?
Okay. Let me see if I go here to share. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Share sound. I got it. Let's see. We're going to make this work.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias? Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes those shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times, when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We'd never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an overrepresentation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that,
I actually deep down inside have been taught that black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race, and exploring ways we might combat the problem. One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
Okay, so I'm going to stop my share for just a minute so I can see everybody. And just anybody's thoughts about this idea of the peanut butter and jelly analogy. Does that seem relatable? Does that seem like something that either has shown up in your life, either something that's happened to you, or maybe that you've had those biases yourself where you have one and the other, and there's a correlation between the two. So anybody have any ideas that they want to share about that?
I mean, I can start us off if you want, even though I'm
Thank you.
moderating. I actually use the Harvard tool. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about biases. And since I teach anatomy and physiology, so students who are going into the nursing field, I try to talk to them about implicit biases, and I have them take that. Oh yeah, there it is in the chat. The Harvard test, and they all love it and are terrified by it because I think like what we saw in the video at the end is that they could all see biases in other people, but assumed because they could see biases in other people, that meant that they then could check their own biases. So I talk to my students a lot about it.
Yes. In fact, in the course, I have Harvard's implicit bias test in there. This video talked about, the blind spot. And there's a great book, and I have a whole section in there about this idea of the blind spot that, oh, I don't have any biases. It's something that other people have. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else have any ideas about, are you aware of your own biases? Is this something, and I know it seems kind of like paradoxical about if it's unconscious, how can you be aware of them? But yet we need to be aware of our own biases. So is this something that you're aware of, or this idea of the peanut butter and jelly analogy? Any more thoughts on that?
I can say something that I did to counteract bias. I read an article that showed that 95% of instructors in online courses, no matter who they are, respond first and sometimes only to names that look like they're white males. And so I didn't even bother to question it. And I started creating a spreadsheet where I would make sure that I would respond the same number of times over the semester to each student to try to reduce or at least counter potential biases. And I even let my students know that that's why I was doing it. With 50 students in my class, I can't respond to every student every time, but it's my goal to reply to every student equally throughout the term. And so I don't know if it's probably a slightly different bias than the implicit bias that you're talking about, but.
No, that's awesome. And that you're aware of it, and that you came up with some sort of strategy to compensate for that. So that's great.
And also, I would like to add, I'm glad, Cynthia, you mentioned self-awareness and self-reflection, because the reason it's easier for many people, many of us, to realize or recognize a bias in other people, because it doesn't make you uncomfortable when you recognize bias in other people. But when you recognize your own bias, it makes you super uncomfortable, because because you feel guilty, or you feel like, why do I feel that way, or what is going on? And that reflection requires a lot of out of comfort zone issues. And that's why I'm glad you mentioned like the importance of self-awareness and reflection. But I'm telling, we shouldn't blame ourselves for having bias, because it is created. When we had babies, we didn't have any bias, right?
Right.
It was just like learned things through media, as you mentioned, or through like sometimes parents, sometimes your environment you grow up. So we shouldn't feel guilty because these are the things that, like, because of the toxic environment we've been to. But yeah, the important thing is like not letting those biases affect our decisions or behaviors. So yeah, but I totally acknowledge it's super uncomfortable to reflect on those biases in ourselves.
Right. And thank you so much for bringing that up, because that is so true. I hadn't really thought about that before, the discomfort that it can land within myself, because I feel that sense of shame and guilt and, I'm not a good person. And really it's part of the human experience, so it's, being aware of it, understanding it, and what can I do to make sure that it's not causing harm, these biases. So thank you for sharing that. That was awesome. Okay, we'll go ahead and move. I've got one more page.
Implicit bias.
We've heard that. So this is a page from the commitment to relate to diverse lived experiences. I want to make sure I can see that there. Right. This is the iceberg model that's looking at culture. And if you do a Google search, there are many, many different iceberg models. And in fact, there's some that are trees, where the trees are the hidden part, down below. The roots are hidden down below, and you've got the leaves up top. This particular model I like best because it was the first one I ever saw. At one point, Dr. Melissa Salazar with Escala was a educator in residence here at Hartnell, and she brought this and was talking about culture. And this is when I was doing that culture work on my own, that deep dive. And it was just a real watershed moment for me, because I always felt like, as a white person who didn't have any connection to my ancestry, that I had no culture. And I felt this sense of void within me. And I saw, the top part that's in our awareness, which is, visible, 10%, easy to see. And that was the food, the language, the festivals, the music, literature, things like that. And I felt like I didn't have anything that expressed my culture. But then looking at this, you can see all the different things down below. Perceptions, notion of self, beliefs, gender roles, expectations, assumptions. These are all form our culture individually and as communities in who we are. And this is the part that's out of conscious awareness. It's difficult to see. It's the invisible part, very internal. And I could see, actually, I had a very strong culture on how I was raised, and my family and the community that I belonged to. And I could see that culture really was a part of who I was and moved me forward. What I really like in some of the research that I've done is I read Beyond Culture by Dr. Edward Hall, who's an anthropologist. He wrote his book in 1976 and said that culture is malleable. It's something that can change. And that just didn't make any sense to me, because I come from an Irish German background, and I thought, I was born into this. How can I change my culture? It's how I was born. But when I look at this model, I can see that all of these things down below that are really a part of my culture and shape who I am, they can change. My beliefs can change. My assumptions can change. My expectations about how people will be. These things can change. And that gives me really a sense of hope. And a sense of comfort in knowing that I'm not going to always be stuck in these perceptions that maybe don't serve me well. In this module, talking about diverse lived experiences, there were two terms that came up. To better relate to the lived experiences of students, it is important to understand how culture impacts our perceived reality. So ethnocentrism is the experience of one's own culture as central to reality. And growing up as a white person, very much ethnocentrism was a part of my reality, that I was part of the culture that was desired, that was normal, that was right, and everybody else was othered. But I really love this idea of ethno-relativism, where my reality is just one among many viable possibilities. There's no hierarchy. There's no better or worse. There's no one that's normal or abnormal. Everybody's lived experience has value and worth and comes from this diversity of many possibilities. So to understand better the diverse lived experience of our students, we need to start with awareness of our own cultural beliefs and behaviors. What is driving me down below in this 90% that is causing my biases that I might have, that may cause my reactions to things that people say? And then understanding that my students, my other faculty, administrators, everybody that we encounter is also having these lived experiences, these assumptions, beliefs, concepts that are fueling their biases and how they might show up in the world. So take a look for a minute, because we're getting close to being running out of time. Take a minute and look at this image, and just kind of what comes to mind to you and how does it resonate with your experience. And I won't stop sharing for just a minute, because there's a lot of stuff in there. Attitudes towards social status, importance of space, nature of friendship. There's just all of these things that comprise our deep culture. So does anybody want to start us off with some ideas about things that you see that kind of resonates with you? And this idea about culture being malleable, about how it can change. You can either go ahead and speak up, or you can put it in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
I'm happy to jump in, and it's basically to embarrass myself. I had no idea. Like, I am just realizing how ignorant I am. Like, I really thought culture was the superficial top of the iceberg. And so I have to like really think about what you're saying. And I feel like I am okay, so here's my bias. I felt like I was a relatively open person to, learning about my own biases and making sure that I was aware of them and taking action to kind of like Kevin was saying, he's keeping track of the students, like kind of trying to keep track of them. And now I'm like, oh, okay, hello, I'm learning. I did not even think about all of these things at the base of the iceberg being a part of culture, and it makes total sense. And now I feel like I have to kind of go back and rethink a lot of things that I was doing, because I was not taking some of these obviously I was taking into account, but I would have never thought about emotional response, people's concept of fairness, like their own attitudes towards social status, like their importance of space. Like, these are all like, no, yeah, I'm totally outing myself as being ignorant, because I just never even thought about it or been exposed to it yet.
Oh. Well, thank you, Lori, for sharing, being vulnerable and sharing. And when I saw this the first time, truly was a watershed moment in my own anti-racist journey. Because like you, I just it wasn't a concept that I had, and yeah, it's powerful to see that these are the things that are part of our culture that can drive us. I was just thinking the other day how when I was in middle school, I would, have moments of anger and frustration and angst, like a middle schooler often does, and my parents would say to me, you need an attitude adjustment, they would say. You need an attitude adjustment. And so I'd be sent to my room for this attitude adjustment, but I only had like 5 minutes, and I had to like get with the program and then come back in, shove those feelings down deep inside of you and come back with a with a happy face, And I'm realizing these are concepts of emotions and feelings and how I was taught. That was part of my culture, is to, mask those feelings, to hide them. And now, how grateful I am that culture is malleable, because now I know that I can feel those feelings and pay attention to those feelings and honor those feelings and work through them and not just shove them deep down inside. So, yeah, attitudes and things that were views on raising children. These are all things that were taught. Well, thank you, Lori.
Cynthia, I think it's interesting. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Lisa. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this is a interesting comparison to institutionalized racism, which takes culture and tries to freeze it, right? At the same time, it's trying to manipulate culture to make people believe a certain way, right? So I think it's interesting that while we're living in a world where that's happening, that the antidote is to actually do what you're talking about in terms of doing a deep dive with yourself and trying to keep alive the idea that culture is malleable, but it can be used as a negative weapon, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's the whole dance about speaking truth to power, right? Because of what power tries to do to all these things, right?
Right, right. That's great.
So-
Thank you, Lisa.
And I also would like to add, Marla, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sort of getting interrupted by students. I was in and out, and then I finally I was like, I left. I was like, I can't do both. I teach screenwriting class, and so I had on the syllabus. This was a few years ago, and so I had on the syllabus, and I was so paying attention because I'm this total feminist, right? I identify as LGBTQ, think I'm all hip and all that stuff, coming from San Francisco. And I had on my syllabus I made sure I had a lot of women who were screenwriters, who their screenplays were listed in my screenplays to check out. And then I walk in my classroom, and it's like 90% women, but all African American. And at the end of the class, like 5 people came up to me and said, "You have no African American men in there." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're totally right." So I went back, and they were great about it. They were so great about it, but they were really cool about how they, confronted me about it. And I responded by changing it. And then just last year, I had a similar list, and somebody who is differently abled came up and said, "You have no screenplays about with films for people with who are differently abled." And I was like, "Oh yeah, yep, you're right." So I changed it again, and I so love my students for feeling okay enough to tell me stuff. I mean, this is just like 2 of 100,000 examples, right? Where they just come up and they tell me something, and I had one. Anyway, I try to adjust accordingly, but I'm not aware sometimes, and I think I'm being super hip and cool, and then it's like the big duh moment comes up, and you have to be humble and say, "Well, yeah, you're right, absolutely right."
Right. Oh, thanks, Marla, for sharing that. Yes. And it goes back to that ethnocentrism and ethno-relativism. It's just like, allowing that there are many different ways, many viable possibilities of how to show up, and then recognizing them, and then having that vulnerability to say, "Oh, you're right. I missed that one way." Let's uplift that voice. And in the course, there is opportunities to talk about lifting up the voices of everybody, and having a sense of belonging. So that's part of that too. Well, I know we're just about down to the last, I think my last screen, my last pages. Yeah, just to thank you. My email address, this is what the course looks like in Canvas Commons. I'm pretty proud of the artwork that's in there. I want to say I created it, but it's AI created artwork. So how did I really create it? I'm not quite sure, but it's pretty awesome stuff that I really enjoy. So you're welcome again to download the course, share it with anybody and everybody, but just don't change anything in it. And if you ever want to contact me and let me know how it's going and any feedback you have, I would love to hear. And I'll go ahead and stop my share. And just thank you for the opportunity. If there are any last questions in our last minute. All right. Well, thank you. Oh.
I can't resist.
Hi, Anita.
This my name's Anita Crawley. Cynthia and I are friends, and she allowed me to help her with this course, just do some editing and stuff, and it is so outstanding. I really want to recommend that you download it and use it in your either at your institutions or with other groups. It is really outstanding work. Thank you, Cynthia, for contributing this to the body of knowledge.
Thanks, Anita.
Thanks for sharing, Anita. Thank
Oh,
you
and
so much, Cynthia.
Sure, and I do have let's see, here we go. The PDF of my there we go. If anyone wants the slides to my presentation.
Great, thank you
Okay.
so much.
My pleasure.
I'm going to stop recording.